Caregivers are the unsung heroes in many communities, providing support to loved ones while often putting their own health and well-being second. On the Caregiver's Journey, Finding Strength and Reclaiming Balance Town Hall, we will explore the emotional, physical, and mental health challenges caregivers face. Coming up next, we'll share powerful personal stories, practical tools, community resources, and strategies to prevent burnout.
Thank you to the Eunice Joyce Gardner Charitable Foundation for its leadership support of the Health Channel.
Welcome to the Caregiver's Journey, Finding Strength and Reclaiming Balance. I'm Carla Hill. If you're not a caregiver, you probably know someone who is. It could be your neighbor, relative, friend, or a person you work with. The number of Americans who are caregivers is growing. According to a recent study by a major insurance company, there are about 53 million adults caring for a spouse, elderly parent, relative, or special needs child. The average time people spend, the average time people spend with caregivers has also increased to 26 hours a week, up from 9 in 2020, and over 40% of caregivers report a low overall feeling of well-being. There's a lot to discuss, so let's start by introducing our panel. Joining me in the studio is Dr. Latoya Lewis. She's an associate professor of clinical nursing at the University of Miami School of Nursing and Health Studies. We're also joined by Kitty London. She's a host and a TV host and is a caregiver for her mother. Ricky Petty is project director at Palm Health Foundation for the Healthier Boynton Beach Initiative. And joining us virtually is Dr. Karen Gilbert, Vice President of Education and Quality Assurance at Alzheimer's Community Care. And Dr. Margaret Cox is a retired special education teacher and a caregiver for her mother. We're going to start with you, Dr. Lewis. Are you surprised by the number of caregivers that we have in our nation?
Actually, I'm not surprised. I expected it to be a little higher due to the aging population, as well as we have individuals now getting diagnosed with more comorbid illnesses. So I anticipate that number to rise in the next 5 to 10 years because of the multiple generations that we're working with, as well as medications are being used to address different chronic illnesses. So I anticipate that will rise sometime soon.
And Dr. Gilbert, what about you? Do you think the number of caregivers is that high, or could it be even higher?
I believe it's actually much higher. We generally refer to that primary caregiver, but in many families, there are additional family members who take some of the caregiving tasks. There may be friends who help. I believe it's probably significantly higher.
And Ricky, we hear a lot about well-being. What does that exactly mean when it comes to the caretaker?
So when I think about well-being, I think about sustained health, sustained energy, also emotional resilience. As a family caregiver, they go through a lot, and it's important that they prioritize them health so that they can be in position to provide care for their loved ones. So well-being is very, very important and critical.
It is indeed. I want to move to you, Kitty. You are actually living this journey.
Yes.
Tell us about how you started being a caregiver for your mother.
So ironically, I didn't realize I was a caregiver because it's so normal for my mom and I to be together. I'm the only child. It started roughly about 2020, around the pandemic. I started noticing different changes with my mom, forgetfulness. At first I thought it was, you're getting up there a little bit in age, forgetting the keys, or did I pay that bill? And I'm like, okay, the repeated stories. So after a while I said, you know what, something's not right. And then one day she was picking my son up from school and she called me and she said, I don't know where I am. And I said, okay, we got to get you seen. Something is definitely not right. So she went to a neurologist, and of course, she was clinically diagnosed with dementia. When we left there, he told her she couldn't drive. She really didn't understand, because at this time, she's still, working, live around the house. She's still being herself. And after a couple more months, we start seeing the decline. And it was devastating, because she kind of knew something was going on with her. And when someone knows that they're losing or going to lose their independence, it's heartbreaking for you and the person that is now caretaking for you. And so that was how it started. And again, we're still on this, as you call it, journey.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really personal, and we appreciate all of you that are on your caretaking journey. I'm going to turn to you, Dr. Cox. Your mother has Alzheimer's, and what are some of the challenges that you've faced?
Oh, well, it started, I would say, about the very year after I retired. And all my retirement dreams went out the window. But like Kitty, I saw things beginning to happen, and I took her to, I went to Caregivers conference, actually, and there I met a very capable geriatric psychiatrist who began seeing Mom. And for a long time, she did pretty well. You got the repeated stories and little odd things. But up until 2020, she was fine. Then along came the pandemic. And the lack of social ability to be social and with other people, because she was always the life of the party. And so COVID did her in. 2 years of not seeing anybody, just me and her, and she slowly started to recline, But I did my best. Being a special education teacher, I started using a lot of the strategies I used with my special ed kids. So we did jigsaw puzzles, we read together, but then eventually even that started to go. She could not, even when I read to her, she could no longer keep or contain what I was saying. So slowly, it just started going downhill. Just to let you know, my mother will be 100 years old this year.
Well, look at that. Wow.
Yeah. But she's just gotten to the point now, even where physically it's difficult for her. It's a lot of pain, osteoarthritis. She's having difficulty walking now, and she's also suffering with aphasia. So the words are coming out, and she knows, she still has that cognizance that something's wrong, but she doesn't know what it is. So she's still fighting it. She really is, even at 100.
Even at 100, I would love to bring Dr. Gilbert in. Dr. Gilbert, caring for those with dementia and Alzheimer's can be especially tough, as we've just heard. But what advice can you give us as far as what those that are being taken care of need to be aware of, or the caretakers need to be aware of, in terms of behavioral or cognitive changes that we've just discussed with Kitty and Dr. Cox?
Sure, it helps. I just want to say that you both, it was extraordinary how early you noticed those changes and you knew that you needed some intervention and evaluation. Often families believe that those are just normal age-related changes, and they don't seek that assistance. So that's a message we want to get across. It's very, very important to understand, as someone is developing that cognitive impairment, those symptoms of dementia, it becomes difficult for them to convey what they need. It could be very basic needs. It could be being in pain. It could be a reaction to medication, things that we can typically describe and get help for. They are not able to frame and express that need. And so what you will see are behaviors. When they're not able to make a need known, we see behavior. And so it's important, if caregivers can view that as an expression of something they need and help them to get that evaluation. Often it's with their physician, rather than taking the behavior personally. So in other words, their loved one is not trying to give them a hard time. They're having a hard time, and they're not able to express that need. So recognize the behavior, understand that it's an expression of something they need. Go through that laundry list of the basics. They could be hungry, they could be thirsty, they could need to use the bathroom. Go through all those basics first, and if nothing is helping to redirect them to something they enjoy, some purposeful activity, that's likely the time to get them to their provider. There may be something medical brewing. There could be something related to medications they're taking. Again, really understanding that they're expressing a need with their behavior helps to understand it and actually root cause that challenging behavior.
So, Dr. Gilbert, as a follow-up, whether it's Alzheimer's or another disease or an illness, how important is it for caregivers to know their own physical, emotional, and mental limitations and needs?
It's incredibly important. What I try to convey to healthcare providers, to nursing students, to physicians, when you're caring for someone with a neurocognitive disorder, you almost have a second patient. And that second patient is the caregiver. We talk a lot in healthcare about person-centered care, but with these disorders, it has to be family-centered care. We have to address the needs of the caregiver. Families that call our organization really want to stay together in the community. And we know that in order to accomplish that, we have to help and support the caregiver, connecting them to resources, creating an individualized plan. Every family is unique, with unique needs, with unique challenges. And then we also have to support that patient. That's what we do in our day centers. We're challenging the patient cognitively and physically in hopes of stabilizing that neurocognitive disorder for as long as we can. But it's incredibly important that caregivers do not defer or delay their own medical care, their own dental care. They need to stay socially involved for all the reasons that Dr. Cox described so well. Social engagement is incredibly important to their emotional health and actually their own brain health. So we've got to give them resources so that they are supported at the same time that they're caring for a loved one.
We appreciate that so much, and I think, credit to our guests and everyone at home that is doing just a wonderful job, probably before even seeing this show. I want to turn it over to Dr. Lewis. Family members are usually the first person we think about when we think about caretakers, but a caretaker can be a friend or even a paid professional. What do friends, paid professionals have to consider as caretakers for someone that maybe they didn't grow up with or is not a parent?
So essentially, we also categorize the thing under unpaid caregivers. So these are loved ones, neighbors, extended family members, etc. So what we try to inform these individuals is the acronym CARES. So they need to have clear expectations of what support that person needs. They have to have the capacity to give that person attention and to meet the needs where they are. Next, respect. How can they provide respect to that individual, knowing that their neurological capacity may be limited, their physical capacity may be limited, their daily living needs may alter from day to day, or it can decline, as well as ethically talk to them about the changes that can happen, whether they are involved in decision making or whether they're just supporting that patient through that transition. That's important. And last but not least, this person who's an unpaid caregiver needs support. As some of the individuals on the panel, my colleagues, have mentioned, support is essential. Support is important because these individuals may not have been taught or educated on how to properly provide care for this individual. So we need to provide them with continuous resources so that they can adapt and become flexible and also understand their capacity on what's needed.
We'll definitely be talking about resources as we get into the show, but CARES, that's a great acronym. Sometimes a caregiver can feel like they're all alone with no one who understands what they're going through. One caregiver found support through what she calls a village. Let's take a look.
I actually just fell into caregiving. My dad was diagnosed with dementia. He's had it for about 10 years. I had no concept of exactly what it was and what kind of toll it would take and how it affects the family. He feels very upset, overwhelmed that he's going through this, and that's what led me into the world of caregiving. And I feel blessed that I've had this chance to do it. But emotionally it is hard because you're watching your father die. As far as being prepared to become a caregiver, I wasn't. It's not easy, extremely stressful, overwhelming, but we're there for each other. I became friends with Joanna. We actually didn't have the same clients, but we met at the gardens, and we just connected instantly because I can always be very open and honest with her. She's an amazing caregiver, and I really respect what she does, and she respects what I do. If I didn't have the village and support of other caregivers, I think I would need a therapist. It's not as easy as one thinks.
Job, it can be really difficult for me. So building that community, building that village is really super important. And, you know, I have you. And it's been nice.
I just realized, although I was very overwhelmed at moments, my community is perfect, and I love them, and I have no regrets.
Having someone to help give you emotional support is important because it's easy for a caretaker to become overwhelmed and not even realize it. Here are some of the warning signs. You feel exhausted or anxious. You're easily angered or impatient. Or you feel lonely or disconnected. You may have trouble sleeping or feel yourself skipping personal care tasks. Ricky, we started to talk about well-being before, but what would you suggest to caretakers when they say, I don't know where to fit it in? How do I take care of myself?
So one of the things I would say that's very, very important is prioritizing health. And what I mean by that, first, they have to set clear boundaries and prioritize for self. Caregiving can be a very challenging task. One of the other things that they can do in addition to that is have a schedule and stick to it as much as possible. In addition to that, caregivers have to, really just work with their siblings, work with their family members, and share the tasks, delegate, because sometimes caregivers think that they're in it alone. And it's very, very critical that they delegate the task to family members and siblings. And lastly, take time out for self, because many times as a caregiver, they be so focused on their loved one till they lose themselves. So it's very, very important that they take time out for themselves.
Thank you so much for that. I want to go to the caretakers that we're joined with tonight. Kitty, how have you managed this in your journey? We were talking about it as a journey. How do you take care of yourself?
So as I'm listening to all of this, I'm kind of like self-reflecting. When the lady said in the video, watching your loved one die. It's often referred to, dementia is often referred to as a slow death. And so how I deal with it is very challenging for me. I work from home as well, being a TV producer. And I remember times I wanted to scream. I felt like I was like, if I can go where it's raining, no one will see me cry. It's that deep. And having relief now, my mom is now in a day center, which is tremendous. It gave me about 8 hours times 5, 40 hours a day of relief, because I was constantly being yelled at. I was constantly being cursed out. The police have been called numerous times to my house. At this point, they know us. So, when that first happened, I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I've never had the police called on me before, but I had to remember that it's not my mom, it's a disease. And I had to learn to separate the two. Very hard, because you look like my mom, you talk like my mom, you are my mom, but the things that come out in your actions are a stranger right now, and I'm a stranger to her. Sometimes I'm her mother, sometimes I'm her sister, sometimes she looks at me and say, who are you? what are you doing in my house? And this is the woman that birthed me. So when you have to deal with all those emotions and still work and still be a wife and still be a mother and do all the things that people expect you to do, and sometimes you feel like you have no one left. And getting that outlet is what is definitely needed. Like Ricky said, you have to depend. I don't have siblings, Ricky. I'm an only child, unfortunately. But I lean on faith, and programs like this are helping us.
Thank you for that again. And Dr. Cox, we joked a little earlier, you were like, vacation, what is that? But how do you, as Ricky suggested, how do you make that time?
Well, when she wasn't too bad, I would sneak out when she was sleeping. Like, I'd get up really early in the morning, put on my headphones and head around the neighborhood listening to music or my meditations or one of my Audible books. But she got to a point where I could not leave her alone because she would try to do things that were not quite right. But then I also, like Kitty, the savior of my life was the PACE program. And I've been able to send her to daycare. I now have help that comes 4 times a week. And that gives me time to go to my doctor's appointments, my dentist appointments, And actually, the caregiver and she have a better relationship. She doesn't want me around now.
Well,
the other day, the caregiver was working with her, and sorry, go ahead.
No. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm seeing your face in jest a little bit about how she enjoys her caretaker. Do you mind explaining to us what the PACE program is?
Oh yes, that was my life savior. I am telling you. My mom's income allowed her to become eligible for Medicaid. So she's on Medicare, Medicaid, so PACE took her. And it is, I can't tell you how fantastic a program it is. I really can't. They have everything. She goes there. I think there are 4 PACE programs in Miami. She goes to the one in Westchester. The building itself has a recreation room. Then there is a cafeteria, and there is upstairs, there is a physical therapy, an occupational therapy room, and a clinic. The doctor is there full time. If anything happens to my mom, I don't have to go to emergency. I do not have to go to the hospital. I take her up there. She actually had a stroke year before last, and when I thought, I wasn't sure, it was very mild. So I called, he says, they sent not an ambulance, but somewhere where she could lie down, put her in it, took her up to their clinic, examined her, called me and said, come and get her, take her to Baptist right away.
And that's, is that PACE for those watching, PACE?
Florida PACE, PACE, yes. And the object of Florida PACE is to keep people like my mom from going into nursing homes. She can remain with me. She's in the house that she knows, even though it's getting a little scary now because she's not quite sure. She asked me tonight before I put her to bed if this was her bedroom. I said, yes, love, it's your bedroom. But she's surrounded by family. My sister only lives about 10, 15 minutes away, and one of her grandsons adores her and can come over if I'm stuck. He'll come over and help me with her and stay with her while I go do something. So she's in a familiar environment. And her geriatric psychiatrist said it's because of this that she has remained cognizant as long as she has. I mean, she's not totally gone. She still remembers, and she has minutes that are very lucid. We can actually have conversations. But I think it's because of PACE that has been able to allow me. She goes to daycare 2 days a week, no more than that, because at 100, it's kind of difficult for her to get into her wheelchair and get there and back. She's very tired, but I want it for the socialization. So she goes there 2 days a week. And then I have a caregiver on Tuesday. She goes Monday and Wednesday. And then a caregiver comes in Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then bless my sister, she started working 10 hours a week, 10 hours a day so that she could take Fridays off.
Wow,
And
wow.
she takes her family on Fridays, you know.
Well,
And then the caregiver comes in for about a few hours on Saturday and Sunday too. And then I have someone who comes and bathes her in the afternoons.
well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great resource. That is a great resource.
It is wonderful. We should have them all over the country. You know?
Well, you know, along that lines, we've been talking about caregivers and caregivers mostly being adults in our conversation. But, you know, in some cases, young people have to step up. Let's take a look at one such story.
It's hard being a teenager who cares for a family member. Some of my teachers don't understand the things that I go through at home. All they want me to do is turn in the work that they assign. Sometimes I can't do it because I'm helping my grandmother and my grades are suffering. I love my grandmother. My grandma fell one time and she hurt herself. I help my grandma like getting out of the seats because it's very hard for her to move her knees.
He helps her with mobility. He helps her with household chores.
I help her mop and sweep, wash the dishes, take out the trash.
Emmanuel, he's a 13-year-old who's helping to take care of his grandmother. Being a youth caregiver, it takes away from their childhood, that sense of normalcy of a childhood, because they are stepping into a bigger role. The kids, they generally struggle in school with homework, getting work done, or maybe even falling asleep in class because they're concerned or they're up, they're worrying about their loved ones, or they're helping them in the middle of the night. It makes me feel good that we can be supportive for him, even as far as being an advocate at the school and informing them this is what's taking place in the home.
The Caregiving Youth Program helps me more than I could do for my grandmother on my own. I get more of my work done. My grades been going back up to A's and B's, and I've been getting on a roll.
There are thousands of Emmanuels. He is just one example of the many children that Caregiving Youth and American Association of Caregiving Youth that we help.
Dr. Lewis, I see your eyes there. You know, young people are taking on a bigger role in caregiving.
Yes.
But what kind of toll might that take on their well-being?
Well, Emmanuel expressed some of it where it pertains to school performance, behavior. Other aspects include isolation, not getting the opportunity to actually play and have an opportunity to have release of emotional stress because he's continuously caring for his loved one. Essentially, what we say caregiving is love in action. You're actually seeing how much you care for this person and you're sacrificing your own personal needs. So at a young age, he's sacrificing that. And I'm happy that there is an association to help support him because he may not be able to advocate for himself. There are times that depending on the person's age and growth and development, we may think that that person is complaining. It might not be complaining, it might be caregiver role stress that he's experiencing at a very young age. So lack of sleep, lack of performing his own activities, worrying about her, whether he's at school or at home and sleeping. That is also can create other medical issues because we know stress can contribute to earlier issues. So all of those things can affect him as well as other caregivers. I'm happy that he was able to connect with a group like that. There are many different youth that are doing this in silence without any support. And they're thinking that's just what we do. We take care of anybody who's sick, but they don't realize they also need somebody to advocate for them in arenas like school, to advocate for them for their health needs.
And they may not know how to ask at that age.
Correct,
Yeah.
because it's just expected. We care for our loved ones. but then who's going to help support us?
That's right. That's
So,
right. I would like to turn to Dr. Gilbert. The video spoke about some of the stresses that young caregivers are under. And if they begin to feel overwhelmed, what should they do? If they're watching right now, what would you suggest?
They need to understand that there are resources, that they can speak up, that it's okay to feel overwhelmed, to convey that and to get that help. Young Emmanuel, he is one extraordinary young man, again, as you say, representing so many others. And I believe as a community and trying to develop truly dementia capable and dementia friendly communities, we need to be aware of young people in this role, and we need to reach out and we need to help connect the dots for them and link them with every social service that may be available. The program of all-inclusive care for the elderly, the PACE program, which is also available in Palm Beach County, that's huge. Transporting the loved one to and from, they can handle a lot of medical issues right there at the PACE facility, as you said, and also provide a caregiver in the home several times a week. And, you know, especially for children, I feel for a child in this role, especially, I think we have a duty to make sure that they are connected.
I would love to add Dr. Cox here. You know, you're a former teacher. So if a teacher sees a student caregiver struggling, what should they do?
Try to connect them to resources immediately. Try to get the social worker that works with the school, you know. I think that's the most important thing, to know that you're not alone. And many of those children do feel alone. And I have come across quite a few child caregivers while I was teaching. And the teacher has to be also very sensitive. Okay, if they fall asleep during class, they may have been up all night with somebody who was sick. You know, give them a break. Find out, it's very important for us as teachers to find out why that child is behaving that way. Why is that child's grades dropping? Don't just, you know, start yelling at them or, you know, you can't do this or you can't do that. Beneath it all, there is always something. I worked in a low-income neighborhood for many, many years, and I met a number of children with not just caregiving problems, a lot of other problems. And you have to become, well, you're their mom away from home.
That, you know,
they spend an awful lot of time with you.
That's so true. As a former teacher, that I think sometimes we have them more in class than sometimes they're at home. I want to go to, that's right. I want to go to Ricky. We mentioned underserved communities and children in underserved neighborhoods. How is this stress affecting them even more?
Well, it's affecting them even more because these young people are more inclined to mental health challenges. Studies show that they are more prone to anxiety, stress, and depression, you know, because they are taking on the extra responsibility. So they have to balance their caregiving responsibility as well as schoolwork, and sometimes that could be very overwhelming for these young people. So it's important that we have support services like American Association for Caregiving Youth to help them navigate through some of these challenges that they face. So being in an underserved community, they faced a lot of different challenges, and thank God for American Association for Caregiving Youth.
That's so true. This panel is so filled with great resources that you'll get before we end tonight. But Dr. Gilbert, many adults who are caring for a parent are, in a sense, you know, they're switching roles with them. And Kitty touched on that a little bit. That can be hard and confusing for both, right? How can they navigate that?
Well, what we also find, yes, they're absolutely reversing roles. And one of the most difficult transitions we find for the caregivers we work with is when they realize they might have been the spouse or the child or the sister, but that role is gone, and now they're in the role of caregiver. And that is an incredible shock to the system. It's a very emotional time, and that's often when that caregiver is reaching out. So again, supporting them praising them for what they're able to do for their loved one, making sure that they're connected for resources for themselves. These are some of the ways we can help them with that transition. The respite opportunities are incredibly important. Some homes are multi-generational. We have a caregiver who may be caring for a parent and caring for children at the same time. So as I say, every family is unique. We can never have a preconceived notion of what a particular caregiver needs. We need to listen, we need to observe, and then connect them the best we can with every resource that will ease that transition, help with that role reversal, and so they both can thrive as best as possible along that journey.
I would love to segue there, Dr. Gilbert. Thank you so much for that. So, Ricky, you started with giving us some great resources. Are there other resources for caregivers that you'd like to share with everyone watching today?
Absolutely. There are one great resource, of course, Healthier Boynton Beach is a great resource. You also have resources that they mentioned, More of Life, PACE. We have that locally here in Palm Beach County. You have programs such as the Baldwin Center, Alzheimer's Care, Community Care, and Alzheimer's Association. And there's also another great program called Brain Matters Research that work well with caregivers as well. And the American Association for Caregiving Youth is a great resource for youth caregivers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We want to make sure that you get so many things from this program, but you know, whether it's a young person or an adult, taking on the role of a caregiver is a major life change. So, Dr. Lewis, in your training the next generation of nurses, what does that entail? I mean, they're professional caregivers, but you know, everyone has a different life when they go home.
Correct.
How are you training those professional caregivers to live these two lives, I guess?
So essentially, we're telling them to really bridge the gap and turn one light switch on and the other one light switch off. And it's very challenging for someone who is working, going to school, or just doing other things to now then say, with the rest of my time, to provide care to someone. So it really requires a lot of patience. It requires compassion. Anytime my nursing students that I work with, or anytime I work with patients, I try to say, tell me what you think you need. Because there are times that we may assume what this person needs, and that is not appropriate. Right now, they might need somebody to pour into them, to actually say, tell me what you think you need. When's the last time you took a shower without being interrupted? When's the last time you ate something without being interrupted? Can we give you that break? Other aspects of that is really, how do we show compassion? Compassion is not just by speaking to someone. Compassion is by showing compassion. By actually, another way that I always tell students to pour into individuals is say, you know what, thank you for taking such good care of this person. Thank you for knowing that something was wrong and you brought them in. And it doesn't mean that this person has had extensive healthcare education and training, but they recognize this is not what my neighbor looks like. This is not what how my spouse behaves neurologically or physically. And really just giving them that opportunity to say, you know what, you're doing a great job with this. How can we further support you? And a lot of times I've had patient family members or other caregivers, unpaid caregivers, say, wow, nobody asked me that. They just tell me, do this, do this, do this, do this. And we really need to really find out, what do you need so that you can provide additional support, because you're not trained for this environment.
So Kitty, thank you for the job that you're doing, taking care of your mom. And what advice would you give to someone out there who's just starting this journey and just realizing that this is what this is now?
Couple of things. Well, one, obviously you're not alone, right? And find a room. You may need to scream some days, you know, and not feel guilty, because it is a roller coaster ride. Some days you'll be angry, some days you'll be happy, some days you'll feel gratitude, and some days you'll just feel like, I can't do this anymore. And those feelings I had to learn from groups that I've gone on social media and kind of read other posts that, wow, these people are going through the exact same thing. It's like they have my mom. We share the same mom, right? So I want to let people know. And also, too, don't feel like it should be a family secret. I think that's the worst thing that people do, is they kind of keep everything within the family and you not tell anyone that you're going through anything, and then how can people help you? The biggest thing is I put a post one time on social media in regards to my mom having dementia. I had so many people inbox me on getting help. Have you tried a daycare? Have you tried this? Have you tried? And I was like, no, I didn't know this exists. Oh my gosh. You know, I needed that. And get your affairs in order. Become power of attorney if you can. You know, the little things that happen before they kind of check out, if that makes sense. Because now it's harder where my mom is, because now she thinks everyone's stealing. So if I said, Mom, let me, you know, look at your bank account. Let me see what's going on. Let me see. It's not going to happen. So I tell people, if you see the signs, get help. And if it's nothing, great. But if it's something, you get it early and you get the support that you need.
Thank you for that. That's so personal. We really appreciate everyone's vulnerability and sharing. Dr. Gilbert, what didn't you know that you believe would have helped you? Pardon me, I'm going to go back, and we're talking about caregivers. Dr. Cox, I really wanted to aim this toward you. Forgive me, Dr. Gilbert, I'll be right with you. But Dr. Cox, what didn't you know that you believe would have helped you in the beginning of your caregiving journey? And, you know, highlight any organizations. You've mentioned PACE. Maybe there are other organizations that helped you as well.
Yes, before I got her into PACE, someone helped me with Easter Seals. They also do a daycare program for people. So she went to Easter Seals for a little while, but that was when she was more able. You know, it was, PACE is now better for her because of her loss of walking, her ability to do things now. But Easter Seals was very good. So that's something for people to check out. In terms of what I need, I think what would help is to have resources. A lot of the things I found out, fortunately, I started going to support groups. And through the support groups, I was told, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? But I'll tell you, of all the support groups, the best one is on social media. And the reason I'm saying that is because when you have face-to-face, person-to-person support groups, you talk about how you can help your loved one or what you can do, or what organizations, but nobody ever talks about their feelings. But when you get onto social media, I belong to the AARP group of caregivers on Facebook, you will hear people pour their hearts out in ways that they will not say face to face. They will say it in writing. And it is just amazingly helpful to say, oh my God, I know exactly how she felt when that happened. Yes, I've been through that. You may not see the person, but just reading it and knowing that you're not alone when you have those days when you want to go into your room and just scream your head off, you know. You love the person, but they have driven you crazy all day. And
well, I thank you.
Say, oh my God.
I thank you so much for that. It's great to hear social media being used in a positive way. I'm so glad that you found that. In our conversation in this room, with the exception of Mr. Ricky Petty, women make up the majority of caregivers in the U.S. It's estimated that over 65% of caregivers are women, and they may spend as much as 50% more time providing care than men do. Dr. Lewis, when you hear that statistic, why do you think that is? Why do you think there are more women? You know, some of them are mothers, the eldest daughter. Why do you think that is?
I think that happens because of a couple of factors. So number one, it can be cultural, religious. We also have certain structures within our society that expect women to be the caregivers. In addition to that, there is an expectation also that individuals that are men are not as compassionate, not as caring, not as loving, which is a fallacy. It's a myth, okay? But if an individual has not had the opportunity to provide care for someone, you cannot just discount them because of their gender, that they will not be able to do something. As long as they are focused on providing care for someone, I always tell individuals, it doesn't matter what their gender is, it doesn't matter what their age is, anyone can provide care for anyone. Don't limit it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. Dr. Gilbert, women are the ones at highest risk for Alzheimer's disease, so it's often a female to female caregiver to patient equation. What kind of dynamic does that create, and is it beneficial?
Yeah, I just want to say it's absolutely true. 2/3 of diagnosed adults with Alzheimer's are women, 2/3. So the dynamic, what we have found depends on a variety of factors. What was the relationship prior to this loved one developing Alzheimer's or a related disorder? What other obligations does that female caregiver have? Again, they may also be caring for children. They may be helping with the care of another relative. They may also be working full-time. So again, it will be very individual. We have to evaluate all of the responsibilities that they have, all of the things that are pulling at them to make that best recommendation for the various services that they should take advantage of. I do remember one specific situation where a caregiver was telling me that her mother is really giving her a hard time when she tries to shower her. And after listening to several examples in her story, I said, this is a guess. This is just try this. It may be that she's uncomfortable with her daughter seeing her undressed, giving her a shower. How about trying to have someone from a home health agency come, someone that is, a professional caregiver she doesn't view as a relative, and that actually worked. Now, the patient couldn't say, her mom couldn't say to her, I'm uncomfortable with you undressing me and bathing me. She expressed it with behavior. She resisted bathing. But having a certified nursing assistant come in, someone who's coming in a professional role, they were able to accomplish that task. So I often say there's more art than science. There will be a lot of trial and error. Caregivers also need to understand what worked on Monday might not work on Tuesday.
That's so true.
But that's not a reflection on you. That don't take it personally. It's okay. And another technique that we give is that structure, that schedule. Keep their meal times the same as best you can. Keep their sleep and wake time as best you, because they thrive on routine. They've lost control in so much of their life. But if they have a routine, they tend to, they're able to appreciate the pattern of the day.
Certainly.
So you keep that as regular as you can. If you have to take them to the dentist.
I do have to interrupt there. I apologize. Sure. But we were talking with Ricky about patterns and keeping a routine. We've talked about wellness and the physical toll, the emotional toll, but caring for a loved one also has an impact financially. 4 in 10 caregivers say their financial security has been negatively impacted. About 50% of those say they live paycheck to paycheck, and over 30% say they earn less than $50,000 a year. So, Ricky, many caregivers themselves, they're working in low-wage jobs. They either have to go part-time or quit. What have you seen in your work in the community? How does this impact those caregivers?
Yes, as financially, it's a big impact on our caregivers. And many of them have to either reduce the number of hours that they work and sometimes terminate their employment to provide care for their loved one. And you can imagine what that can put on a caregiver. That's another burden, another concern that they have, other sacrifices that they're gonna have to make. And, caregivers really challenged in that particular area, and, finances are impacted heavily.
Yes, it does. I want to go and add that there is financial aid available that can help ease the money crunch. Here are some of the local resources: the Area Agency on Aging, the Florida Department of Children and Families, and if the person you're caring for is a veteran, the VA has several programs that can help. Besides financial help, as we've discussed, there are other resources locally that caregivers can take advantage of to relieve stress or give them some free time, like adult and youth daycare and Meals on Wheels. But I want to focus on a few that our panel can help explain to us. Dr. Gilbert, coming back to you, I know that Alzheimer's Community Care has a number of services, but I was struck by one called Family Navigator. Briefly, it seems like it could be a huge help for our caregivers. Can you talk about it and why it can be helpful?
Absolutely. The Family Navigator is either a nurse or a social work professional, and that is the first person that meets with the caregiver and the patient. And that is a service that we are able to provide at no cost to the family. There is no financial barrier to engaging with that navigator. The navigator will evaluate where the patient is at in the course of the disease. They'll also evaluate the caregiver's wellness. We do a depression screen, we do a suicide risk screen, and several screens for what pathologies might be affecting that patient. Many of them have had no diagnosis, no official diagnosis. So with this screening, we can help navigate them to get that quality diagnosis. So it's a wonderful service, again, because it's available to everyone. And it really does help the caregivers start to understand where they are in the process and what services they may need immediately, and what is next and next and next. And again, every family is unique.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Lewis, what can health professionals do to support caregivers?
In regards to supporting caregivers, give them brief information. Do not give extensive pamphlets. Give scenarios of situation. For example, one day this patient, or one day your mom may say this to you. There may be times you may feel guilty. How to adapt and cope with those things. In case you need us, please call us if your loved one does A, B, and C. A lot of times we influx caregivers with a lot of information, and because they may be still in a state of shock or now understanding that their loved one is deteriorating, they may not absorb all of that information. So really try to focus on realistic things that can help them out, and realistic components that every day that they should focus on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. Caregiving can be a full-time commitment, admittedly difficult and stressful, but when the person that they're caring for passes away, it can leave a caregiver adrift, dealing with grief and loss of their sense of purpose. Let's listen to one woman's story.
Having been an intensive caregiver for a while, logically I knew it's over. There's no more caring for him. But in my heart, I was like, is he okay?
After caregiving, many people experience a lingering caregiving instinct, a persistent sense of worry, physical tension, or the urge to continue caring for someone. To cope with these feelings, try channeling that energy back into caring for yourself. You've spent so long tending to another's needs. Now allow yourself to ask, what do I need right now?
I was like distraught and worried about whatever form he's in now. Is he okay? Because I'm not there to care for him.
Dr. Cox and Kitty, I know this is a very emotional topic, but please feel free to share your thoughts on this aspect of caregiving.
I guess I try not to think about it. I know she's going to go. And recently my sister took her for a long weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And to my amazement, I kept tiptoeing around the house. I kept listening, trying not to make noise so that I wouldn't awaken her. I was amazed at, the fact that I just couldn't get used to the fact that she wasn't there with me. I know she's going to depart soon. And in fact, she's so in so much pain and distress and misery right now. It probably is better. But I don't know if I'm ready to deal with it, quite honestly.
And Kitty, any words that you'd like to share?
I just want to say that, every caregiver is a superhero. Just, I would say keep your head up. I tell myself that every day. Take 1 minute at a time and just look out for resources like this program and keep fighting the good fight. That's all I can say.
We appreciate you so much. Before we get to the end of the program, I'd like to share a quote from former First Lady Rosalynn Carter about caregivers. She said, "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver." Dr. Lewis, what are your thoughts about that, and any final thoughts before we go? We have about a minute left.
I would like to tell caregivers to be patient with yourself, understand that there are different needs. I would like to tell those who are caring for patients and training caregivers to also give them the essentials in order for them to survive on a day-to-day basis, because sometimes it's day-to-day.
And Ricky, before we go?
Yes, I would say, identify with self-care. Take care of self. Prioritize your health, because if you're not good, you can't take care of no one else.
Thank you everyone for joining us, Dr. Cox, Dr. Gilbert, Kitty, Dr. Lewis, Ricky, Petty. That's all we have time for tonight, unfortunately. I want to thank our panel, as I just did. They're marvelous, and our audience for joining us for this whole town hall. I hope we're able to address some of your questions and concern about caregiving. We salute the caregivers, those superheroes here on our panel and all of the ones in our community. Please stay strong and reach out. There is help available. I'm Carla Hill, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you to the Eunice Joyce Gardner Charitable Foundation for its leadership support of the Health Channel.